Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. So normally we would be doing updates every week or so about the production of episode 9, but there's been precious little to report, and in fact a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is really knocking down some things that have been talked about, bandied about on the internet. So let's just dive right in. First of all, the last time that we did an update on Star Wars Episode 9, one of the things we talked about was not taking some things that got posted on social media too seriously. And the example that I threw out there was the post that John Boyega put on Instagram with him congratulating Naomi Ackie to the production of Episode 9, or the cast of Episode 9, and he had a different hairstyle in that photo, and so folks jumped on that and said, oh my gosh, John Boyega has a different hairstyle for Episode 9, this is really interesting and something, and maybe it's not really the case, because if you look carefully at the cryptic on-set photo that J.J. Abrams posted for the start of production of Episode 9, you see John Boyega in the background, and that does not look like the same hairstyle in that Instagram photo. It looks much more like the traditional Finn hairstyle, if you will, and so the whole thing about what actors and other folks involved in the production of the movie post on their social media profiles may not be timely. And it happened again with Dan Mindel, who is the director of photography on Episode 9, posting a photo on Instagram that folks thought was from the set of Episode 9. And it turned out that it was actually from the set of John Carter, which is a movie that he worked on a couple of years ago. And so, yeah, it's a little strange, the timing of posting that photo, but be that as it may, it was not in fact an Episode 9 thing. So yeah, you can't jump too fast and too hard about these things, because they know exactly what they're doing. They know they're not supposed to be posting photos like that. And really, when you think about, say, Solo: A Star Wars Story, all the photos that were coming out of there were coming from Ron Howard's accounts. It wasn't really coming from anybody else's. And so, yeah, you can kind of see where the buck stops as far as any photos that you can trust on social media from inside the production of the movie. Now, there was another rumor kicking around that the script as turned in for Episode 9 was the longest script of any Star Wars movie, and that, hey, maybe Lucasfilm is considering splitting it up into 2 movies, a la Deathly Hallows in the Harry Potter franchise, for example. Well, Lucasfilm, A, hasn't come out and said that they're going to do anything like that, and B, these things are supposed to be trilogies, and so it would be really strange for them to decide, oh, let's break this up and make it into 2 movies. And just because we've got a draft that they're starting to work with, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be the draft that ends up being the be-all, end-all, final say on what Episode 9 is going to be. And, when you think about, say, The Last Jedi, for example, the script that Rian Johnson turned in was also long, and there were scenes that were cut out of it, and so it's certainly going to work that way for Star Wars Episode 9 as well. So this whole idea about Episode 9 being broken up into an Episode 9 and an Episode 10, I don't think so. I mean, it's, I guess kind of fun for a moment to consider and to think, hey, that might be a fun possibility, but no, let's just keep it as a trilogy, right? That's what it's intended to be. And there's really no suggestion that it's going to be anything else. Okay, let's put to rest another rumor that's out there. So a publication called Radio Times, which, from time to time I see them come across my radar, and they're usually reporting stuff from other folks, and that's not a knock on them, because, hey, I'm reporting stuff from other folks too, right? But they tend not to be a proximate source of information. And yet, apparently, they scored an interview with Richard E. Grant, who is playing one of the new characters in Star Wars Episode 9. There had been a rumor floating around that he was slated to play Grand Admiral Thrawn, who you may know and remember from previous conversations we've had on the podcast here, or reading about him in novels, or seeing him on Star Wars Rebels. Well, he says that no, he is not playing that character, and that he's not actually allowed to say anything about what he's doing, because either he will get blown up or run over, or some other bad thing will happen to him if he does. And there's going to be more of this interview published in a few days, but that particular thing the Radio Times folks saw fit to share in advance of their actual publication of the full interview with Richard E. Grant. And we talked about this a bit in a previous episode of the podcast about whether episode 9 even needs another villain to begin with. I mean, you've got Kylo Ren as the big bad, and you've got General Hux as an able second-in-command villain. I mean, really second-in-command technically, now that Kylo Ren is the supreme leader of the First Order. And then Gwendolyn Christie, she's not in the official cast announcement, so who knows if she's really going to come back. I figure just if any character is able to survive the kind of situation that happened to Captain Phasma in episode 8, it would be Captain Phasma. I mean, I think that is a very strong and very determined character, especially with what we know about her from the comics and from the novel. So I'm not sure if she's going to make it back. I hope she does. I hope she gets another chance to be a very impactful villain in episode 9. But yeah, right now, doesn't seem like the odds are in favor of that, just based on the minimal information we have so far. All right, a couple more items here for you. One of them, continuing the theme of websites that generally aren't ones that have been on my radar as being the first to break Star Wars news or being reliable sources of Star Wars news. That's not a knock against them necessarily. Maybe they've got this one right. It's just, not a site that has really come across my radar. So it's Omega Underground, or at least that's the name of this particular reporting outfit that is now part of Geeks Worldwide. And they're saying that they have heard from their sources that Episode 9 filming is going to go through February of 2019. Now, they don't necessarily say, hey, we have sources inside the production, or, they don't give any particular information about how they have sourced this information. I will say that's a bit different from the way, say, the likes of Making Star Wars or Star Wars Newsnet will talk about their inside information and the rumors and leaks and spoilers that they get. They at least give you a little idea about how they are developing their sourcing, about how they trust their sources, or whether they've given that particular source has given them reliable information in the past. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's caveated with Making Star Wars and Star Wars Newsnet that makes you want to trust the information a little bit more, or at least give it more credibility than, say, a situation like Omega Underground and Geeks Worldwide, where they're reporting this, and it isn't given the same kind of treatment as I'm used to from the likes of Making Star Wars and Star Wars Newsnet. So take that for what you will. The time frame is, potentially reasonable. I mean, it took roughly 5 months or so for The Last Jedi to film, but that would have put it, at the end of December. And why it would go through to February? Well, I don't know necessarily. I mean, maybe you want to argue the case for that whole script being longer than anything idea. I don't know. J.J. Abrams has never struck me as a director who takes a very long time in filming. He seems to be a pretty efficient director, not necessarily on the level of like Clint Eastwood, like bang, 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 and we're done, and that's it. But I don't know if I necessarily see it going all the way into February, but that's one I guess we'll have to mark for later reference and see what the chances are that works out the way that they're saying it will. And there's one last little one to share with you too, but I'm going to share that over on the audio version of the podcast. That's over at sw7x7.com/iTunes or Spotify or wherever you like to listen to audio podcasts. But for now, for this video at least, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.